Donald Trump's Gaza peace deal is a crushing blow to the British Empire. He outflanked decades of deliberate policies of religious radicalization and economic backwardness. These are the policies that have kept the Mideast in perpetual turmoil. Now, the foreign policy experts said it would never happen, but it did. And this week, we saw the release of the hostages. We saw Donald Trump address the Israeli Knesset to thunderous support. And we saw him in Egypt, meeting with an unprecedented gathering of Arab and Muslim leaders. Pakistan's Prime Minister Sharif made clear who had brought this breakthrough about.
Mr. President, I would like to salute you for your exemplary leadership, visionary leadership. And I think that you're the man this world needed most at this point in time. World would always remember you as a man who did everything, went out of the way to stop 7 and today 8 wars.
And Donald Trump did this with no help from the UN, no help from Europe, no support from global financial institutions or from any quartet of negotiators. Yet somehow the British Education Secretary felt that the UK should take the credit.
We have played a key role behind the scenes in shaping this. It's right that we do so because it's in all of our interest, including our own national interest, that we move to a lasting peace in the region.
Well, when you say behind the scenes, like what? I mean, it seemed to everybody else in the world that this has been done by Trump and the Israelis and Hamas. What part did we play?
These are complex matters of diplomacy that we are involved in, but we do welcome and recognise the critical role that the American government played in moving us to this point.
Well, U.S. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee had the right response. He said, "She's delusional." But aside from British delusions, not to mention their actual role in creating the crisis, the question that the mainstream media and the so-called experts can't answer is, how did Trump and a team of non-diplomats do what no one else has been able to do? So he negotiated with nations and their leaders directly. He recognized that they all have legitimate interests and that they're not simply colonial pawns on a chessboard. Now, you're not going to hear this from the press or those social media personalities who tell you that you have to take a side. Either you have to be pro-Israel or pro-Palestinian, or you have to hate the Jews, or you have to hate the Muslims. This is Susan Kokinda, and today I'm going to give you some insight into how Trump did this. For decades, I've studied how the elites have prevented peace, how they've carried out color revolutions and regime changes, and how they've kept patriots in the dark with lies and phony ideologies. So if you recognize that what we're bringing you is something unique and something you need to understand, please like and subscribe. It helps our reach on YouTube. So today, we're going to look at how Donald Trump brought about this historic agreement by burning the empire's rulebook. First, how he put the economic reconstruction of Gaza at the forefront, avoiding the previous traps set by the World Bank, the IMF, and the other globalist banks. Second, how he marginalized the British-run radical networks on both the Muslim and the Israeli sides. So first, let's talk about the economic foundation of the Gaza deal. Did you catch that exchange with what certainly sounded like a British reporter on Air Force One?
Mr. President, I wanted to ask you about your conversations with world leaders today. You said that everybody is unified over your plan, but we heard from President Sisi calling for a two-state solution and independent Palestinians.
Well, you're talking about a different plan. I'm talking about something very much different. We're talking about rebuilding Gaza. Right. I'm not talking about single state or double state or two-state. We're talking about the rebuilding of Gaza.
Trump stressed that what comes first, before any talks of a final political solution, is rebuilding Gaza. Why is that so important? Because that is precisely what has undercut previous peace agreements. Remember the Camp David Accords back in the 1990s between Yasser Arafat and Yitzhak Rabin? What happened to those? Well, besides the fact that Rabin was assassinated by a right-wing Zionist, the political solution disintegrated because the promised economic development never materialized. It was smothered by the World Bank, the IMF, and other international banks. And time and again, the international community and global lending institutions have pledged money for Gaza. Most of it never arrives, or it ends up in the hands of NGOs, or it's just doled out as handouts. So what do you do when you keep people perpetually poor and dependent? Well, you get anger at Western institutions and the potential for increased radicalization and recruitment to groups like Hamas, which is exactly what happened. Trump threw this entire model out the window. He has a completely different approach, as Mark Halperin said on his show yesterday. He said, quote, "Diplomats offer promises. What Trump offers is projects of mutual interest." And Trump knew that that wasn't going to happen with the World Bank or the City of London or Wall Street banks. Instead, he rallied the sovereign nations of the region to provide direct economic assistance. At the Sharm el-Sheikh summit, he kept pointing out that there are a lot of rich countries in this room. Now, Trump's opponents and the establishment media attack Trump's economic deal-making like it's a bad thing, and it's no more than corruption. But what they're really attacking is the very principle of economic development, which they have been throttling for decades. So what Trump has been doing is to now unleash the financial and human potential of the region, and its immediate mission is to rebuild Gaza, putting the Palestinian people on a path to genuine economic independence is fundamental to future stability. But let's go back to that point about radicalization, because that's where Trump has shown himself to be a real strategic genius. The reason previous peace efforts failed isn't because the conflicts were too complex or the hatreds too deep. They failed because they accepted the terms of a conflict which had been deliberately engineered by the British. For decades, British intelligence and their American counterparts have created and deployed radical movements on both sides. So first, let's talk about the Muslims. The British created and funded the Muslim Brotherhood, also Hamas and other extremist groups. Their purpose, destroy nationalist governments in the Middle East. Remember, that's the prime target of the globalists, sovereign nationalist governments. Now, this is a story that Promethean Action researchers have covered for decades. And if you want to really understand what President Trump has been up against and just how big a breakthrough this peace deal is, then you should go to the link and subscribe to our free newsletter. You're going to get that story and much, much more. Now, here's an example. Look at what happened in Egypt. In 2011, the government of Hosni Mubarak, a nationalist government, not a theocracy, was overthrown by the British-created Muslim Brotherhood, with plenty of help from Barack Obama. That Muslim Brotherhood government was so hated by the people of Egypt that it was overthrown less than 2 years later, and it was designated a terrorist organization and banned. That was the first of the Arab Spring regime change operations run by Anglo-American intelligence. Most of the governments that had nationalist aspirations and that had assured full freedom of religion to Jews, Christians, and Muslims were overthrown by radical Islamists. An even earlier example was Iran. First, the British, along with the Dulles-run CIA, overthrew the nationalist government of Mossadegh in the 50s, replacing him with the Shah, and then when the Shah was no longer convenient to British geopolitical plans, he was overthrown and was replaced by the Islamic Republic, which is what rules Iran today. Here's the point. The issue of modern Islamic theocracies didn't come from Islam. That's a lie peddled under the heading of a clash of civilization, which has been pushed by British intelligence assets like Bernard Lewis and Samuel Huntington. In every case of radical fundamentalist movements or governments, you're going to find British intelligence with help from their American neocon friends. But it's not just British intelligence. King Charles is a proud sponsor of the Oxford Center for Islamic Studies, and in just this last July, he presided over the opening of the new King Charles III wing. But Donald Trump's approach is the opposite. One of the very first things he did as president in his first term was to travel to Saudi Arabia and lay down the law. Stop supporting al-Qaeda and other extremist groups. He basically told those countries, stop being pawns on the geopolitical chessboard. I'll treat you like a sovereign nation and recognize that you have legitimate needs and economic promise. And it shows. When push came to shove, those nations stepped up to become part of this week's historic peace deal. Hamas would not have been brought to the table without major Muslim countries weighing in. Now let's look at Trump's approach to Israel. Contrary to the fevered narratives of Candace Owens and so many others, Donald Trump has his own agenda, and it is not Bibi Netanyahu's. Here's what a diplomat who worked for both Bill Clinton and George Bush said about Trump.
Donald Trump on this one has demonstrated a degree of will unlike any other president, Republican or Democrat. He has pressed an Israeli prime minister in a way that none of his predecessors have ever done on an issue that prime minister considers vital to his political survival and the way he would define Israeli security requirements.
Trump never was a Netanyahu puppet, but for those who are still caught up in that particular narrative, the now famous video of the Israeli crowd on Hostage Square booing Netanyahu and cheering Donald Trump might cause you to rethink that a little bit. But Trump also knew that Netanyahu had to contend with his right-wing coalition partners. As Barbara Boyd has documented extensively in her updates on this channel, revisionist Zionism is just as much an artificial creation of British intelligence as is Islamic fundamentalism. So what did Trump do? By making himself more popular than Netanyahu, Trump strengthened the hand of the peace faction in Israel. So when the right-wingers threatened to sink the deal, the leader of the peace faction, Yair Lapid, stepped up to tell Netanyahu that Lapid's party would be his safety net and support the government. What Trump has always recognized is this: when you neutralize the radical fringes, when you appeal to the legitimate interests of citizens of different countries, no matter their ethnicity or religion, and when you ground it all with genuine economic development, anything and everything is possible. That's how he's brokered 8 peace agreements. We know that the British and their globalist allies aren't done. All you had to do was look at British Prime Minister Keir Starmer's face as he was standing behind Donald Trump at Sharm el-Sheikh. He looked like he was sucking on a lemon. But Trump has their number. Many people have legitimately expressed concern about Tony Blair getting on the Board of Peace, for good reason. But on Air Force One this week, Trump made clear this is not a done deal. He said, I want to ensure that he is a choice acceptable to everyone. I want to make sure that Tony is liked by everyone because I don't have that information. Trump is committed to making this work, and he's going to listen to the principal players on the ground. So what we've witnessed this week isn't just a ceasefire. It's a complete shredding of the imperial playbook that has kept the Middle East in turmoil for what seems like 3,000 years, as Trump keeps saying. But this peace agreement is just the beginning. Obviously, there's a lot more work to be done in the Mideast and, of course, with Russia and Ukraine. And here's where you come in. Donald Trump doesn't need spectators. He doesn't need a chorus of people who are spouting social media narratives. He needs people who understand and support what he's doing. Promethean Action's newsletter will give you the intelligence you need to do that. So please subscribe and be part of these historic events. You can also help us expand our coverage and our activity by becoming a paying member or contributor. Because what we're witnessing is what happens when an American president puts America first and treats other nations as sovereign nations and not colonial subjects. The empire is crumbling, nation by nation and deal by deal. And Donald Trump is writing the blueprint for a world based on mutual respect and genuine prosperity. The real question now is, will we have the wisdom to build on this foundation? Or will we let the globalists regroup and drag us back into their deadly games? That's up to all of us. So this has been your midweek update. Stay focused, stay mobilized, and thanks for listening.
Please take a moment and subscribe to our free newsletter at PrometheanAction.com.